another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a beautiful Tuesday morning, and we are happy to be back with you, every single one of you. Thank you so much to every one of you that did join in last night for our night broadcast. I did start about a couple of minutes after 11 p.m. as we did follow updates from that game between Leeds United and Everton, a game in which I thought that maybe, just maybe, Everton were robbed on the day, on the night. I mean, we'll be discussing, of course, that decision that gave Leeds, the sole goal that turned out to be the match winner. We'll be discussing a bit of transfers. We'll talk about Uganda Cranes and the African Nations Championships. I know yesterday I did give you a lineup of the quarterfinals, but what I forgot to mention was that for the quarterfinals of Uganda, apologies on that, just having our audios tested to make sure everything checks out. Sorry. So, like I was saying, what I forgot to mention was that for the lineup that I did give you of the quarterfinals is that it is dependent on a couple of results from Group D, which do come today. So, Group D is getting wrapped up today, and those games and those games between Sudan and Senegal today, and Nigeria up against Congo, will determine who Uganda could face at the quarterfinals, as well as who Algeria will face off with. If, let's say, the two sides do share the scores in, let's say, goalless draw or 1-0 draw, then it means that Uganda will have a date with Sudan, as they are the leaders of that group. From what I've seen, Sudan is a very, very strong team, and then you have Senegal. Anyway, none of them is an easier opponent, but it is what it is. So they'll have to face off whoever they get to face off after having qualified for the quarterfinals for the very first time of the African Nations Championship. So, I mean, it's really it allowed me just say congratulations to Team Uganda upon winning that. Then also allow me extend my sincere apologies again. Once again, today we're late. Our usual time should be 9 a.m., but due to sometimes my morning routine gets a bit more extended than I hope it to be, and we get on here late. But like the old adage goes, better late than never. So we are back to discuss sport, morning sport, and everything to do within that line. So allow me, anyways. Okay, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. But anyways, for those of you that are just joining us, kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel and yeah, and help us grow. But also, if you're a usual suspect, please give me a like on the broadcast as of this morning. Let me know why you're joining us. What would you like us to discuss in regards to morning sport on this Tuesday morning? It's a bit of a chilly, sort of a cold morning. The sun is just coming out here in Uganda, and yeah, but it is what it is. Then we'll be discussing. We'll be discussing transfers, of course. Jadon Sancho's transfer rumors and speculation are never going to go away. Those ones are there to stay after he seems to be rejecting a proposal to move to AS Roma at some point just last week. We're being led to believe that he was open to move to AS Roma, but maybe new offers have come that he must consider. And like I said, the sticking point, apologies on that. The sticking point for Jadon Sancho's any proposed transfer is always going to be with his wages, because he's on really, really high wages. So at Manchester United, and it's not very many teams that can really afford those wages, as per the brother of some of those teams from Italy, even Spain, even the UK itself. You'll find teams that seem to say that look, your wages are too high and we can't afford them, even though we would have loved to sign you, and things like that. So they must find a way to make it work, because Manchester United do want to move the player on, as the writing is on the wall, has been almost all summer, dating as far back as last season. So that is an unavoidable kind of circumstance that they do find themselves in. So if you're just joining us, kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel if you're new here, and do let me know where you're joining us from. If you're a Uganda Cranes fan, do let me know what your thoughts were about the game. If you're a Premier League fan, do let me know if you did catch that game between Leeds United and Everton. Give me what your thoughts were, what were your impressions of that game. And then if you are a Spanish La Liga game, there was a game between Elche and it was Elche and what? There was a game last night in the Spanish La Liga that I'm sure some of you may have caught up on. Personally, I did not get to watch that game because, yes, it was between Elche and Real Betis. So let's pick Everton. For Everton particularly, I felt we were hard done by the decision of the match referee because, I mean, they considered a late penalty, which gave Leeds, the match-winning goal. That was in the 84th minute. Maker did convert from the penalty spot to ensure that Leeds kicked off the Premier League return with 3 points against the Toffees of Everton. Now, the reason as to why I say Leeds must feel hard done by, Everton must have feel hard done by that kind of decision is because it was a penalty. Was it awarded as a result of a handball? But when you review that footage, I mean, I've looked at that clip multiple times, and I'm thinking to myself, we've seen worse. We've seen Lodwy handle that ball in the forbidden area with his arms spread around, and he never got a penalty given against him. And yet James Tarkowski had literally his hands wrapped around his body, and as maybe the referee interprets that as the player moving in the direction of the ball with his body with the intention of blocking it, which should be the case. Unfortunately for him, he does not get to the ground hard enough for that ball to hit maybe his shoulder or tip of the shoulder, but it hits the side of the arm, and while the arm remains in its natural position, and that is awarded as a penalty. Now, again, I understand you ought to leave nothing to chance. I understand you ought to leave nothing to chance, but it really, it's really a bit of a tricky one. It's a tricky one. Like, how do we go from justifying that? And the challenge is going to be, again, the lack of consistency when it comes with some of these decisions, that at one point we're going to see such decisions not be given as penalties, and yet on another day it's being given as a penalty. So that lack of consistency is what is going to be one of the most contentious decisions ever. And then, so for me, for as long as the hands or the arms are in a natural position, I do not think it should be a handball. Why? Because it's not like you can cut off your arms and sort of park them somewhere, then defend or play the game in a certain moment, and then pick them up like you're a doll. It just doesn't happen that way. We must acknowledge that as forbidden as a handball is, which ought to be deliberate to a certain extent, is that the hands are part of the body, and during body movement, they sometimes do move. So if we cannot acknowledge that, which is a scientific fact, that you see, so many things with our bodies happen subconsciously. How many times do you catch yourself breathing in? Not quite very often, really. Not quite very often. And yet you are breathing in literally every second, So the reason as to why you do not catch yourself breathing, unless you've caught a cold, is because the yellow duck says, yo, how are you? Looking good in the blue, bro. Thank you so much. Thank you. How are you doing, the yellow duck? How is the hustle going? How is the palm oil work going? Hope you're doing good. I hope you're doing good. I haven't seen you in the last couple of days. I think about more than 2 days or so. Yeah, but it's a pleasure to have you around. So I think we ought to respect that. We ought to respect that at some point, these things are going to happen, that these things are going to happen, You see, like I've said, you have a player falling in a falling position, and the more I review that footage, the more I think to myself, could the referee have done different? I know in his opinion, the ball hits the arm of James Tarkowski, and that's the justification for him is that simple, is that simple. But you see, because of the way he intended to block the ball, which you can't blame him that it was the wrong way. I mean, when you're trying to block a ball, look at it in a set ball. Sorry, in a dead ball situation. You do not get to decide where the ball hits you. You do not get. Oftentimes, the only thing you can decide is if you're jumping to hit the ball. But other parts in a dead ball situation is that it can go either way. Now, James Tarkowski appeared to have dived to make the block, which ended up with the ball hitting his arm. But again, when you look at the positioning of his arm, I understand he is trying to make a block. But when you look at the positioning of his arm, he has his arms wrapped around his body, trying to take away this arm and putting it at the back, and it's still awarded as a penalty. Now, if we have a player with arms in their natural position and then it's still awarded as a penalty, then what's not going to be awarded as a penalty for as long as the ball is a player's arm? Besides the ball to hand, Dale Duck says good, but it's been rainy for a week now, so no trip recently. Okay, I think usually when it's raining, transportation becomes a bit harder and things like that. Yeah, we've also had our own couple of downpours, actually, particularly over the course of the weekend on Saturday and Sunday. But more intensely on Saturday, there were heavy, downpours. But yeah, it's all good. It's good to know. Good to know that somehow you keep hanging in there. Anyways, so for me, I understand why the referee thought it was easy for him to deem it as a penalty. But for me, in my opinion, I wouldn't give it as a penalty. It's one of those decisions that it's one of those decisions that you do not give. Why? The player is falling or decides to dive to make the block, and then, but he does not spread his arms out to try and block the ball. You get? He did not try to do a Luis Suarez in 2010 against Uruguay versus Ghana. That's not what happened here. That's not what happened. Anyways, still fierce about the Chelsea draw. Okay. Oh, the Chelsea draw. I mean, those about to happen. It's only the start of the season, first game of the season. I usually do not take much stick to the first game of the season unless our display has been so poor that it makes you feel concerned. But personally, it was never the case. But anyways, so match day one did wrap up yesterday with Leeds versus Everton. That game concluded with Leeds winning it by 0-0. So that means we had about 7 teams win their games, their opening games of the weekend. We had about 3 games that ended in draws. The game between Newcastle and Aston Villa, the game between Brighton and Fulham, and the game between Chelsea and Crystal Palace. So those were the first 3 draws of the season, while all the others were defeats for teams like Everton, Manchester United, Bournemouth, Brentford, Burnley, West Ham, and Wolves. So all those were defeats. I do not need to read you the table, but Man City are on top, Sunderland, Spurs, and those do follow because of their goal difference. Pretty much we know that. Then also, Priya Lifestyle says, oh, okay. Oh, forgive me. I need to read that correctly. Hi, Priya. It says, Rade Hindi. I don't know if you're asking whether I can speak Hindi, but if that's the question, I do not. Apologies on that. My brother-in-law is asking, will Isaac pull through? I mean, there's no signs at this stage that he will pull through, that he will join Liverpool. There are no signs of that at the moment, but we can't rule out anything with still more than 10 days left to the current transfer window. We still have a long way to go on that. Actually, it's almost 14, no, about 12 days still left to the transfer window. So anything can happen. Eze's free kick was unlucky. Yeah, I mean, the referee justified that by saying that there was a foul committed by McKehy, so it had nothing wrong with Eze's free kick in itself, but what the other player did during the moment of that free kick. So really, he was only judging to the letter of the law. Then the Newcastle manager said it's pointless for a contract now. I mean, yes, he must feel that way. I mean, if you have an employee under contract and they are refusing to execute their duties, and yet there's an expectation that you will continue to pay them or that you must heed to their demands, then it doesn't make much sense. Priya says, yeah, okay. So look at it this way. Look at yourself as an employer. You have an employee who you've given, let's say, a 2-year contract. They serve 1 year of that contract and they are bound by that contract. And then they tell you, I'm not going to work unless you start providing me with food at work, or you start giving me accommodation, or you start giving me ABCD, So basically, Alexander Isak is telling Newcastle that yes, I'm under contract with you, but I'm not going to play for you anymore because you must grant me a move at Liverpool. Newcastle are not obligated whatsoever to sell Alexander Isak to Liverpool. They are not obligated whatsoever. That's one. Two, the player is under contract. You still have a 3-year contract. Now, whether you believe in the validity of that contract or you do not, the simple answer is that it is valid. You are bound by the terms and conditions of that contract. Whether there was a gentleman's agreement outside of that contract that has not been enforced, it does not negate your responsibility to continue serving under the current contract. Now, again, I'll put it this way. A lot of people didn't know, including myself, that Wayne Rooney was on the verge of joining Manchester City at some point in his career. I think, was it around, it must have been after 2009, maybe between 2010 and 2012, around that period. I do not remember correctly. But Wayne Rooney almost joined Manchester City. And the feeling around the Manchester United dressing room was that he was good as done, that his fate at Manchester United was done. But guess what? A couple of days later, he did sign a new contract and stayed at Manchester United. And we know he went on to be a Manchester United, he goes on to be a Manchester United legend and literally cult hero, Now, but when the situation came for him was that he wanted to do the move. He informed the club about everything, but he remained professional. He still trained, he still played if he was selected to play. Now, you have Alexander Isak who says, please excuse me from the club's Asian tour, and the club do that. They excuse him from the Asian tour. He doesn't go because he's requested to be allowed to explore his options. Now, you can't do that while you're on a tour. Now, he doesn't get to represent the club. He leaves the club and goes and trains at a different club, his former club in Real Sociedad. That's at the Zubizieta facility. Now, he returns to the club with the expectation that he's going to be integrated with the rest of the squad, and yet he's been behaving contrary. Now, what other players supposed to feel about you, that you're behaving that way? Now, you may have valid reasons, or you may think you have valid reasons for behaving the way you're behaving, but professionally, that's not good. Now, let's look at a couple of scenarios. Waza at City would be wild. I mean, it would have been wild. It would have been wild, It would have been really wild. But let's imagine a few scenarios. Let's say that Newcastle, because they can, and let's say they try to play the long end game. What's the long end game? To say, look, we're not going to be budging on player pressure and this kind of thing, where players are under contract and they are refusing to play just because we are not granting their wishes. Now, how do we stick it out to them? You'll see out the rest of his contract, which is 3 years, will allow to take a loss on him, which is quite significant and very painful, but he won't make a transfer until the end of his contract. Now, at present day, he's 25, by the end of that contract, he was probably 28 or turning even 29, And imagine missing 3 years of football just because you do not want to play for the current club that you're at, As unfortunate as that would be, So it doesn't take your career anywhere. It doesn't take your career anywhere if you're not playing. That's one. Two, Newcastle say, because I've always been of the opinion, come sit with the club, talk, and for Newcastle, I would say, do not sell the player. Tell the player, we are not selling you this summer. Why? We do not want you to leave, but we are willing to sell you next summer for this amount of fee. That's a gentleman's argument that we think we can honor, Even if they were to put it in writing, they can put it in writing under certain conditions, For as long as the condition is A, B, C, D, then you can leave. If our transfer fee is 170 million pounds as guaranteed fees, then you can leave. Whether that's an agreeable term remains to be seen, but they can come to that kind of agreement. Have talks, get, my expectation is that you will be fined by the club, whether it's a weekly wages or monthly wages, whatever the case will be. Then apologize to the rest of the team, get reintegrated with the rest of the team, play out the season, and get your move next summer, because Newcastle have tried to find replacements within the transfer window, and they've been unsuccessful, They've been unsuccessful. They've tried with Benjamin Sesko, they've tried with Hugo Tike, even Yohan Wissa has they're so far failing. They expect to go back in with a good bid at Brentford, but that remains to be seen. They tried with Joao Pedro. He went to Chelsea. They wanted Liam Delap, went to Chelsea. They wanted to sign Brian Mbeumo, went to Manchester United. So they've done everything so far within their power to try and find attacking players that they can fit in their mold, not just as replacements for Alexander Isak, but also because they need to reinforce their own squad, as it already is. And they've already lost the striker in Cam Wilson, who has since joined West Ham. Never mind, I'm not a huge fan of that transfer move anyways. So that for me is a sticking point. And if you do heed to Alexander Isak's demands and stance, what is it to say that after one season, you do not have another player or two making the same kinds of ultimatums? Now, take this scenario. Next season, we play this season, Newcastle do not qualify for the UEFA Champions League. They do not win any piece of silverware. And then suddenly, Sandro Tonali is like, I want to leave. Joelinton says, I want to leave. Bruno Guimaraes says, I want to leave. Anthony Gordon says, I want to leave. Tino Livramento says, I want to leave. Fabian Schär says, I want to leave. Steven Botman says, I want to leave. For how long can clubs sustain that player power? Now, I understand the conditions or the realms within which players ought to have certain powers, but for as long as you are under contract, and that the club has not negated on any of their responsibilities as per the terms of that contract, then you ought to stay professional. You ought to keep working. How many people work at places that they dread, but they still work because they are serving valid contracts, or that they are yet to find viable opportunities? You have that. Let me give you another example. Alexis Sanchez signed for Manchester United in a swap deal with Henrik Mkhitaryan moving in the opposite direction. Now, apparently, and he's going to tell this story, that after his first training session at Manchester United, he asked his agent whether he could return to Arsenal. Now, I knew he asked that as a rhetorical question because deep down he knew it was impossible, because he thought it was that bad a place that he needed to move away immediately. But nonetheless, there's no single day that Alexis Sanchez was picked to play for that Manchester United team, and he refused. Clearly, he did not love to be there, by those own words, but he stayed and remained professional. Look at another example that we can give is Luis Diaz in this transfer window. One, Barcelona wanted to sign him, Bayern Munich wanted to sign him. There's some supposed interest from the Saudi Pro League. At one point, he did inform Liverpool that they should entertain new contract talks or they should let him leave. And eventually, it boiled down after advances rejected from Barcelona, from Bayern Munich. Eventually, Bayern Munich returned back in contention. He told the club he would want to leave and join Bayern Munich. But there is no single day that Luis Diaz refused to train. There's no single day that if he was picked to play, he did not play. By the time they played in that behind closed door friendly against Stoke City, in which they won by 5-0, Darwin Nunes scoring a hat-trick in that one, as well as Federico Chiesa being the other on target, he still trained, he still played in that game. When they went for the Asian tour, including the trip to Japan, he was still with the rest of the team. He was still with the rest of the team. Now, at that point, the club in itself, if they are saying maybe we are now thinking we're going to sanction a move, is that they can ask the player to train alone because they do not want him to continue picking on their tactics while he's destined to move to a rival club. Now, you could argue that Bayern Munich is not within the Premier League, but I mean, Bayern Munich and Liverpool could meet in the UEFA Champions League. So that's a totally different scenario, but he remained professional. I mean, we've seen it one too many times. Players seeking a move to leave a club, and they will put in a transfer request, and say, I would wish to leave. That's one. Two, and usually that comes with certain consequences, but that's not the case. He's not handed in a formal transfer request. He's only asked the club to be allowed to explore his options, So for me, it makes it difficult. I find it really, really hard to defend Alexander Isak, and I'm one to often try to defend players. But in this one, I do not see how now, I must acknowledge that I do not have all the information on table. One, I'm formulating my judgment based on the information that I have. Under the previous management, apparently he was promised a new contract, a new improved contract. That was one. Now, that management, I think it included Cheveli, something like that. He left. They were forced out of the club. New management came in, including a new, I think, technical director. They reviewed the situation and said, no, we're not giving you a new contract, or we're not revising your contract. At that point, he was still 4 years. He still had 4 years left for his current contract. They said, you're already on good wages. You're one of the best players in the club, so we're not giving you a new contract. Now, it wasn't an outright saying no to giving him a new contract. The club were in a situation and remain to be in that kind of situation where they need to trade carefully financially because of profit and sustainability rules, So now the player might have felt betrayed by that. And that's when he informed the club that he would be leaving at the end of last season. Now, just because you told the club that you will be leaving at the end of the season, it does not give you the right to violate your contract, or it does not make it an obligation for the club to let you go just because you asked to leave. You see, how kids ask for everything and anything? Just because they ask doesn't mean you're obligated to give them. You make a rational decision as an adult or as a parent or the guardian and decide for them and say, look, based on ABCD, we're not doing that. And this is the situation for Newcastle. Based on their prevailing circumstances, they have assessed the situation and they're saying there's no way we're letting you go. Now, the manager, Ed Howe, must feel hard done by. Of course, he wants this situation as resolved as soon as possible, as soon as yesterday. But the club knows. Remember Sanchez, first training at United, he wanted to leave right after. Yes, exactly. He wanted to leave right after. Bro, you're live in front of my brother-in-laws. They are so interested in your news. I've been telling them to go watch your Romano. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, the Yellow Diet, for mentioning my name among the peers. Thank you so much. So, in the whole situation between Newcastle versus Isak, for me, it's the club. The club are in a very, very good position. Player still has 3 years on his contract. Even when he sees out this season, he will still have 2 years left for his contract. They're in a very good position contractually. Two, they're not obligated to sell whatsoever for as long as they feel their valuation is not being made. But also, let's look on the other side of Liverpool. Now, you're Liverpool. You signed a midfielder like Florian Wirtz for 400 million pounds as guaranteed fees, plus 16 million pounds as expected add-ons. How do you justify making a bid for arguably the best striker in the Premier League, if not one of the very best in Europe? That's subject to opinion or subjective in itself, and you make 110 million pound offer. That's just not good enough. And I'm sure Liverpool knew well when they were making that bid, that it was just not going to fly. Leo Katz John says, I do not think it was a penalty, but Leeds played really well and deserved 3 points against Everton. Yeah, they played really well. That's true. But you see, playing well is one thing, and getting a result is another. And we can give so many examples of that. Go to the game between Manchester United and Arsenal. Manchester United played well. Arsenal went away with the 3 points. So just because you played well does not mean that you deserve the 2 points or you guarantee yourself the 3 points. In any case, there is no point awarded for playing well, for as long as you fail to put the ball in the back of the net. So for me, like I argued, in my opinion, it wasn't a penalty against James Tarkowski. Yes, he was, whether he intentionally dived to try and block the ball, he had every obligation to make that kind of dive. But he does not make a dive as a goalkeeper with his arms stretched out to block the ball. He retained his arms wrapped around his body. And that's why I feel he was hard done by, So yeah, yes, you may think that based on their performance, they deserve the 3 points, but that decision that decided that they get all the 3 points was an unworthy decision, in my opinion. There says 8 of us are here just by the porch resting. Okay, raining all day. Okay, I hope the weather settles a bit down and allows you to get onto some of the responsibilities that you ought to get to. But thank you so much, guys, for keeping locked. What was Mourinho's quote about 3 points? Mourinho's quote about 3 points. I do not remember the exact quote, but I do remember the allusion to the 3 points. Now, you see, the beauty and ugly side of football is that, you see, no matter how well you play, for as long as you do not score, you do not get to win a game. That's just the nature of football. Now, for example, even if you played a game and you lost 10 goals to 9, you're not going to get credit for scoring 9 goals. You do not get a point for that. You do not get a point for that. So that's just the nature of football. Play well, do not fail to score, there's no point for you. And this takes me to my other topic about Arsenal. Now, I do not know what's wrong with Arsenal fans or some Arsenal fans. I've seen a good number of them ranting in agony about how poorly they played at Old Trafford. And I'm thinking to myself, are you deluded? Would you rather have gone to Old Trafford, played well, but walked away with defeat? Or would you rather go to Old Trafford, play an ugly game, and walk away with all 3 points? Because at the end of the season, it's the points that count. It's not how well you played across the season. It's not how much of football possession you had. It doesn't matter how many shots on target or attempts on goal you had. At the end of the day, what counts is who put the ball in the back of the net. It's just that simple. So they must be delusional to think that now, and I do not get this. One day you're demanding your manager, Mikel Arteta, for winning. You're saying he must win. He must win a trophy. Now, I'm going to make this audacious or very unpopular opinion. If you're an Arsenal fan, or if any other club's fan, would you rather have played like the way Arsenal played over the weekend, over a course of 38 games and win a trophy? Or would you rather play well like Manchester United did in the previous game and end the season trophyless? Arsenal fans, do let me know. What would you choose? I would rather play like the way Arsenal played over the weekend, have a poor display like we also, but walk away with 3 points. Let's go back to 2004-2005. I mean, that Chelsea side of Jose Mourinho never played 1 minute of fancy football. Literally, never played 1 minute of fancy football. It was all about 2 things. Put the ball in the back of the net, defend your goal with your life, and they won the Premier League trophy at the end of the season, conceding a mere 15 goals. So that means the amount of goals they conceded came in only 15 games. So I just do not get it with Arsenal fans. Do you want to play well and do not win games, or you want to win games regardless of how you play? So for me, I'm about win games regardless of how you play. The ends will justify the means, So let's not go too much of that. You can keep the possession, and I keep the 3 points. And I keep the 3 points. Was it exactly that? And one time he was asked, "Would you rather win 4-3 or 1-0?" He said 1-0. It's all 3 points. He's not conceded. And by the way, Marcus Rashford was speaking about him the other day, and he said, for Jose Mourinho, what mattered was winning. The tactics didn't matter that much. Reviewing the game after winning, no sense. He wasn't up for that. The only time he reviewed games and gave players the rant was when they lost the game. But he was all about winning. Go win the game. If you won the game, the rest is background noise. As simple as that, you know. Then you say delusionist at its finest. Here in my state, we call Arsenal fans Orang Delulu and Delulu person. Very unkind comments, I must say. Very unkind. I mean, look, and for the times I've watched the Premier League, and it's been a bit of a long time, depending on where you sit or how old you are. Because if you're far older than me, you could say that's a short time. But Arsene Wenger, in 22 years, managing Arsenal, only won 3 times at Old Trafford. In 1998, in 2002, and in 2006. For those of you that remember the game in 2006, I think it was Emmanuel Shea Adebayo that scored the sole goal that won Manchester United, that won Arsenal that game. Jens Lehmann was awarded an indirect free kick for handling the ball close to, I think, on the line of the 18 yards box. You know, so I've seen Arsenal struggle at Old Trafford so many times, even the very best of Arsenal. You remember the Arsenal of Sami Nasri, Cesc Fabregas, and even the Arsenal of Thierry Henry. They would go to Old Trafford and suffer. They would go to Old Trafford and play a very beautiful game of football, but walk away with nothing. Because somehow Manchester United could end up scoring and winning the game. Because to them, whatever playing nice did not matter. And people knew it. Ferguson knew it. It didn't matter whether he had his best players on the pitch or not. He knew he was going to win against Arsenal. He knew these are Arsenal's best players. Put a few players on to mark them, man mark them, tackle them, foul them here, there, and there. You know, make them disoriented, make them annoyed, make them feel uncomfortable. Really, just and then score on the other end. I've often used this example. Go back to 2017-2018. Jose Mourinho is the manager of Manchester United. Arsenal go to Old Trafford, play arguably one of the best games they ever played in an attacking sense, and still lose 3-1. Antonio Valencia did score in that game. I think Arsenal had a defensive side of Leroy Koscielny and Skodran Mustafi. Peter Cech was in goal. So Antonio Valencia did score. You remember Jesse Lingard scoring the burst and making that dance? You know, oh, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe that game was at the Emirates Stadium. But they played a good game. David De Gea was the man of the match. I think he had about 9 or 13 saves in that game, you know. And they still lost. Arsenal still lost. Why did they lose? Because, yes, they played well, but they did not win. It was that simple. It was that simple, you know. Actually, the game was away at the Emirates Stadium. It wasn't at Old Trafford. But my point is, even at the Emirates Stadium, they played a brilliant game of football. Alexis Sanchez could literally did everything well within his power to try and score, but David De Gea, it felt like David De Gea had glue in his palms. Every ball he touched, he saved. Bar one, because Alexander Lacazette scored what turned out to be a mere consolation for Arsenal. But Man United walked away with all 3 points. They didn't need to play well, you know. So that's the point. That it doesn't matter how good or bad you play, as long as you walk away with all 3 points. Of course, most teams in the attacking sense would love to play the way Manchester City played like against Wolves. But if Man City had played like that and still lost, what kind of discussion would we be having? We'll be calling Wolves the heroes, you know. And by the way, Arsenal fans are forgetting to credit their own voices, one in set piece play, their own voices in defensive play, because that's just as good. I mean, wasn't it Sir Alex Ferguson that said defenses win you titles? Strikers get you the goals, but defenses win you titles. So yeah, age 2 was my childhood. Was my childhood. Was my childhood seeing my cousin, who was an Arsenal fan, a week after the defeat, still crying when we mentioned it. It was a home. It was at home. The leprechaun dance. Yes, the leprechaun dance. Yes, it was at the Emirates Stadium. You remember that dance of Jesse Lingard, and I can't remember how many times Jesse Lingard reminded Arsenal fans of that, because it didn't matter what Arsenal did on that pitch. At the end of the day, the result read Man United 3, Arsenal 1, period. Now, go back to that 8-2 defeat. I mean, now, on that day, particularly, Arsenal did not play well. First of all, Arsenal were dragging their feet in the transfer window. They hadn't signed players. Apparently, they did not have the resources. They lose 8-2 against Manchester United and go and sign about 5 players. Andre Santos, Queradinto, they sign Mikel Arteta, they signed who else? There's another 2 players that were signed. I think Park Chu-young was in that cohort of players that were signed, really, after that embarrassing defeat. So, I mean, take a chill pill, Arsenal fans. Just appreciate that you went to one of the toughest grounds in the Premier League, faced a very good Manchester United side, and walked away with 3 points. Because we could come at the tail end of the season, and it is those 3 points that you look back and say, maybe that's where we won the Premier League title. Maybe that it all started there. And had we not won that fixture, we wouldn't have won the Premier League title. Go back to the season of 2022-2023, yes, 2022-2023. I think that's the season. When Arsenal won 18 games out of 19. I think it was about 18 games out of 19. That run. And guess the game they lost? It was against Aston Villa, 2-0. It's what cost them the Premier League title. It's what literally cost them the Premier League title. Actually, it was 2023-2024. That was the season. That's the game that cost them the Premier League title, losing to Aston Villa by 2-0 at home. Moreover, I think it was Ollie Watkins and Leon Bailey that scored in that game. So it doesn't matter. Go back last season. Arsenal played well against Bournemouth, but they still lost by 2-1 at the Emirates Stadium. You remember? And then subsequently, after that, I think they drew against Crystal Palace. They had a good game against Crystal Palace, but still conceded 2 goals, and it ended in a 2-all draw. So we've seen this dance one too many times for us to say, oh, Arsenal need to play well and then win at the same time. Winning is what is most important. How you get to win is a whole different story. Yes, you say De Gea could save the Titanic. Was at the Emirates, was it? Yes, it was at the Emirates Stadium. Yeah, it was at the, I just confirmed that. So Ashley Young was flying in the H2 game. Yes, I think Ashley Young scored a couple of benders. Wayne Rooney scored brilliant goals. I think that's the same game in which Carl Jenkinson got a red card. And then I think the game after that, or the game before, I think it was it Alexander Songbilong who got himself a red card? So, I mean, it was just a terrible start to the Premier League season, really. Then Bailey and Watkins scored in that 2-0. Yes, those were the goal scorers. Thank you so much for that comment. So, Arsenal fans, take a chill pill. Just appreciate the fact that you won. Next weekend, Arsenal are up against Leeds United. And what is that going to mean? You can get to play well. You're at home. Look to improve on that kind of performance. But for now, just acknowledge that you won, and that's what matters. West Ham United will be up against Chelsea. Man City will be up against Tottenham Hotspur. Bournemouth against Wolves. Brentford against Aston Villa. Burnley against Sunderland. Leeds United against Arsenal. That will be the late kickoff on Saturday, by the way. Crystal Palace against Nottingham. Everton, Brighton. Fulham, Manchester United. That's at Craven Cottage. Newcastle, Liverpool. Very interesting game to look forward to. At Chelsea. Now, by the way, what makes that game interesting between Newcastle and Liverpool is the whole Alexander Isak kind of situation. Some people still believe that after that game, then maybe Alexander Isak will join Liverpool, but for as long as, because there's no circumstance where Newcastle let go of Alexander Isak and remain as good a team. Once you lose your best goal scorer, you're bound to decline. You're bound to decline. Because remember, Newcastle are not Manchester City, who will lose Kevin De Bruyne and suddenly Tijani Reinders is ticking all the boxes as though he's been playing in that team for the last 2 years. You're not Pep Guardiola, who can play with Phil Foden as his false nine, even while leaving Brad Erling Haaland on the bench, who will bring Omar Mamouche to play as a striker, who will bring Ryan Cherki to play as his striker while leaving a striker on the bench. Newcastle are not that. They do not have that luxury. So they ought to keep that in mind. Another London derby for Chelsea, they will be up against, Liverpool, Newcastle will be the last game. I think that game will come on Monday night. Yes, it should be coming on Monday Night Football. I hope Leeds can pull it off. Well, now, I think Leeds are going to play the kind of game that Arsenal love teams to play. That open kind of game, you're trying to pass it out. You're basically playing what Arsenal play better than you. So every time you're playing a team that is better than you at certain aspects, look to do the opposite. And that's where Jose Mourinho are going to be one of the best coaches. Because for him, he knew that if I need to beat up against Barcelona, I need to play Pepe and Ramos, maybe to play Pepe Lima in midfield to be rough against Messi. That's what I need. Play him alongside Sami Khedira, make it rough and tough, make them get tired of the game. So it's about that. I see Chelsea still needs maturity. I mean, yeah, they need that because they do not have lots of experience in that squad. When you look at some of their most senior players, most of their players are young, really. They've not won much, although they've won something, which I believe is a very, very good motivation, which is why I think they will compete for the Premier League title this season. I do not think they will win it, but I think they will be among the competitors for the title for a good chunk of the season. Because when you look at William Estaval, new to the Premier League, Cole Palmer has been there for quite some time. He has the Premier League experience, but I mean, he's not that much. He doesn't have the overall maturity, although he plays quite decent than most mature players. João Pedro has been there. Nicholas Jackson, this one could leave. You look at Benoit Badiashile, that one they want to move on. Tosin Aderabio, I mean, he has the Premier League experience, but overall midfield, they lack that leadership, that strong leadership. The kind of leadership that Thiago Silva will be able to give you, the kind of leadership that a Virgil van Dijk would give you, or would give your team, a John Terry would give you, a Rio Ferdinand would give you. Not much depth in maturity. Yes, they do not, because majority of their players are young, or are within the age of between around 20 to about 25. There are about majority of their players. And you see, while winning the UEFA Conference League is a good motivation factor, again, I can't wait to see how they cope with the UEFA Champions League, because playing in the UEFA Conference League against the lowest ranked teams within Europe is one thing, and then competing in the UEFA Champions League is a whole different story. Now, the advantage for Chelsea is that they do have the pedigree. They've been there before. They've won the competition twice, 2021 and 2012. So they know how to compete there. But we're talking about a different cohort or facet of players. We're talking about a manager who is going to be guiding them through his inaugural season in the UEFA Champions League. Now, everything that he won last season, including beating up against PSG in the finals of the FIFA Club World Cup, points us to a direction that he is capable of guiding this team to greater heights. But like I said, oftentimes UEFA Champions League is about pedigree, is about that what differentiates teams is that maturity that you're talking about. So yeah, I do agree with you on their lack of depth in maturity. Seems like all the UEFA Champions League under 21 are gone. Nobody seems to lead each other. We need a new Thiago Silva. Now, yeah, I'm one of those that do think that Chelsea need that commanding defender, and they are in the market for a centre back. Reports did suggest that they are interested in Alessandro Bastoni from Inter Milan, but we'll wait and see what will come up their sleeves in the coming days. They remain in pursuit of Alejandro Garnacho and Javi Simons to try and bolster their attacking ranks, which I believe, in my opinion, are already strong. When I look at Chelsea from the midfield going forward, they're one of the best teams in the Premier League, if not actually the very best. When you look at their attacking strength and their dynamism from midfield going forward. But it's in defense where I do have questions. While Kukorea is good, while Richard James is good, we know his injury issues. Malo Gusto is good, but sometimes he can be an average player. Then the goalkeeper, they sort of need that number one top goalkeeper, one who is better than Robert Sanchez, one who is better than Philippe Jorgensen, in my opinion, and things like that. So when I look at Chelsea overall, they have a very decent squad. But if there are areas of improvement, for me, it has to be in the goalkeeping situation and the defense. Chelsea can pull off a 4-2-4. Yeah, pretty much, depending on how they want to set up. However, I think for as long as most of these players are fit, it's going to be Moises Caicedo alongside Enzo Fernandez, and then it will be Cole Palmer ahead of them. Then I do expect Joao Pedro to be the one starting, Pedro Neto on one side, and maybe William Estavao on the other, or Jamie Gittens, or whoever, And then still the advantage for Chelsea is that you can also play Joao Pedro as a 10, or you can play him on the wing, that's on the left wing, and then start Liam Delap at the tip of your attacking, or of your striking line. So they have a lot of dynamism within that squad. So if you're playing a much lesser team, why do you need a double pivot? Just play Enzo as your 8, Caicedo as your 6. But when you're playing against a very strong team, like maybe Manchester City, maybe Arsenal, I would understand you playing Moises Caicedo alongside Romeo Lavia, and then you have maybe Enzo Fernandez ahead of them. And then you beat Primitive, and then you have push Cole Palmer to the right wing, and Pedro Neto on the other, and Joao Pedro. Excuse me, in that sense. So that's how I would look at it. Anyways, guys, Augusto and Kukorea as defensive fullbacks. Yep, Neto, Dilap, Joao Pedro, Palmer. Yeah, that's the setup. But in that kind of setup, then Cole Palmer plays as the sort of number 10 in that role, which he does thrive in really, really well. But yeah. So guys, I think we've discussed Chelsea, we've discussed Leeds United and Everton. Like I said, yesterday Elche were involved in a 1-1 draw against Real Betis in the Spanish La Liga. Today you have a game coming your way in the Spanish La Liga between Real Madrid and Osasuna. That game is coming at 10 p.m. East African time. Like I said, Sudan are in action in the African Nations Championship. The Chan, we're going to talk about that in a bit, but Sudan are in action against Senegal, while Nigeria have a date against Congo. Then also we do have the UEFA Champions League qualifiers. Those ones continue. Rangers will be up against Club Brugge. Qarabag in action. Sivena Zvezda up against Pafos FC. Yes. It would, but I would love Chelsea to pull off a 3-5-2. Now the way Enzo Maresca loves an inverting left back, I do not see that happening. But I mean, by the way, majority of teams are going to play with that kind of system. The 3-5-2, or actually, majority of teams are going to play with a 3-2-4 kind of system. That's how I see them. One, they'll begin with the back four, of course. And allow me use the example of Arsenal or even Chelsea themselves. They line up a back four, but they have either their left back or right back inverting into midfield to join the anchor man, who the number 6 or the defensive midfielder, to form two. And then you leave a back three, you have two players in the middle, and then that's fine. Then all these other four are all in the attack. They lead the press and that kind of thing. I'm sure you've seen that kind of alteration in play. And then when it goes to defending, that's when they retreat into a 4-4-2 or into a 5-3, a 5-3-2 kind of system, in that kind of play. So it's not so strange of you to suggest that Chelsea play with that. But if you are to play with that, you would need, for me, I think you would need Trevor Chalobah, you would need a Levi Colwill to be fit, maybe a Wesley Fofana or Tosin Adrabio. Then you would have to play Kukorea or Richie James, at least on the wing backs. One of them must play, because one of those can invert into midfield, and then you can pack, the midfielder and going forward. You say low blocking is Chelsea's game originally, yep, but because again, Chelsea's midfield, you look at players like Andre Santos, Dario Esugo, Romeo Lavia, they're all available for selection within that midfield, within that midfield. And Andre Santos is a very, very good player, arguably one of the best players at Strasbourg last season, where he spent on loan. Mourinho and Conte were masters at that. Now, Conte and most Italian managers play with the back three. And you remember, Antonio Conte lost to Arsenal by 3-0. That's when he said, to hell with the back four, and he switched to his back three. It had John Terry, it had Gary Cahill. Who was the third? I'm forgetting the third. But in the wing backs, he had Marcos Alonso, he had the Nigerian forward, Victor Moses, on the other side of the pitch. And then that midfield that had N'Golo Kante, that had Cesc Fabregas, Eden Hazard, and then you had Diego Costa. Leading the attack, you had William Borges de Silva. So yeah, Estavao seems promising. Yeah, very, very promising talent. William Estavao, very, very promising of a talent. And then guys, quickly about Uganda. Now, Uganda Cranes, they did send their fans in utter delirium, in wild celebrations yesterday. It was the kind of game that had all emotions. First of all, Uganda Cranes did kickstart the game, knowing that they had to win. You mentioned Cesc Fabregas and Kante. Kante was worse. Kante and Matic, on the other hand, was good. I think it all depended on who you are playing as an opponent. But anyways, briefly about Uganda Cranes. So yesterday, Uganda Cranes went into the game against South Africa. That's Bafana, knowing that they needed to win or draw to ensure that they do qualify to the quarterfinals for the first time in the African Nations Championships. Now, the African Nations Championships are a continental tournament that is played by players that play within their domestic leagues. So that's the setup. So that's the setup. And then you had, so Uganda Cranes got themselves in a lead. Jude Semugabi scoring to make it 1-0. That's in the 31st minute. A brilliant goal he did score. As Uganda Cranes went into halftime with a 1-0 lead, but in the second half they quickly lost that, because in the 52nd minute they did concede to Ramale's goal to make it 1-1. Some of these South African names are really hard to pronounce. And then about 6 minutes later, Thabiso scored to make it 2-1 in favor of South Africa. Now, while Uganda Cranes were chasing that game to find the equalizer to ensure that they do qualify, then they conceded the third through Ndolondo, Nd- Ndlondo, they conceded the third in quite spectacular fashion. The goalkeeper went in to try and, press on an early ball. He gets played out. He's caught out. The net is left empty. You had the defender on the line trying to hit that ball, but he could not reach it, and it hit the back of the net, and it was 3-1 in the 83rd minute. However, in the 88th minute, Uganda earned themselves a penalty following a foul on Himbisibwe, and that penalty was converted by Alan Okello. It made it 3-2. He was quickly withdrawn, and then in added time, Uganda won themselves a penalty due to a handball in the area. And then the captain, Roger Storach, stepped up and scored that penalty. And it finished 3-3 between Uganda Cranes and South Africa. And Uganda Cranes advanced to the quarterfinals of the competition for the first time as also leaders while leading their group. Now, you have the three host nations in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, all leading their groups. Kenya in Group A, Tanzania in Group B, and Uganda in Group C, respectively. So, very beautiful game of football. It gave Uganda Cranes fans the tears. Some had even started walking out by the time some of these goals, by the time the two red goals were scored, because they thought it was all done and dusted. All hope was gone, So, but that's the nature of football. It gives us all the emotions, the jubilation, and as well as the tears. You say, but to see Cesc left out by Conte hurts. I mean, Cesc Fabregas, for as long as he was fit, you do not leave a player of his quality out. You do not leave a player of his quality out. I forgot where you are from, bro. Oh, it's okay. It's okay. I'm from Uganda, small landlocked country called Uganda, in the eastern part of Africa. So that's where I'm from. So on the map, you'll see a small country called Uganda. It neighbors Kenya. It neighbors Tanzania. It neighbors South Sudan in the north, DRC Congo in the west. In the southwest, our neighbors are Rwanda, like that. So that's our geography. But thanks for asking that question. Okay. Just, receiving some troubling news regarding someone, but okay. Anyways, wow, Uganda, the parliament that mentioned Maguire. Maguire has been mentioned in many parliaments, but predominantly it was Ghana who first mentioned him. It was a parliamentarian in Ghana who referred to him as a very poor defender. Anyways, guys, let's quickly look at the latest from the world of transfers, speculation and gossip and things like that, because there's plenty of that making the rounds. A lot is making the rounds on that front, and yeah, Leon Bailey is joining AC Roma on an initial season-long loan with an option to buy from Aston Villa. Manchester United consider Joshua Zirkzee not for sale this summer, despite interest from some Italian clubs. Manchester United are aware that Jadon Sancho's plan to consider different proposals after rejecting AC Roma. On Monday, United insist for Sancho to find a solution as soon as possible. Then of course, Bayern Munich remain interested in signing Nicholas Jackson. They have a loan proposal that was rejected by Chelsea for Christopher Nkunku. Your country was famous, Ugandan Knuckles. Our country is famous for many reasons, but predominantly for the beauty of its climate, Mother Nature, really, the chimpanzees or apes, gorillas, wildlife, right? Longest river in Africa has its source in Uganda. That's the River Nile. Largest freshwater body in Africa, that's Lake Victoria, is in Uganda, also shared by Kenya and Tanzania. So yeah, we're known by a great many deal of things, including some of our bad politicians or policies. Our finance minister has been trending in the last 1 year or two. He's been one of the trending faces on TikTok. Our finance minister is called Matia Kasaija. Anyways, Inter Milan are monitoring the situation of Cameroon goalkeeper Andre Onana, with speculation still growing over his future at Manchester United. That's according to the Sun. Chelsea, guys, this transfer update is compiled by BBC Sport. Then Chelsea are open to a loan offer for England winger Raheem Sterling, 30, and want to move on a further 8 players before the transfer window shuts. I think so. You have players like Benoit Badiashile, you have players like Axel Disasi, you have players like Raheem Sterling, you have players like Nicholas Jackson, you have players like Kanari Chukwemeka, among those that they want to move on. Wow, my father says it's the Pearl of Africa. Yes, we adapt the Pearl of Africa. That was mentioned by I think it was Winston Churchill that dubbed Uganda the Pearl of Africa. So yeah. Then also Bayern Munich have rejected. Sorry, the Blues. That's Chelsea have rejected a loan offer from Bayern Munich for Christopher Nkunku. Then that's according to the Times. He's 68 years old, full of knowledge, retired aerospace engineering. Okay, wow. Aerospace engineer, retired at 68. Yeah, that sounds about it. Okay, must have had a very, very good career. Congratulations to him. Then Newcastle are set to make a 35 million bid for BRC forward Yohan Wissa. But some reports do suggest that Brentford want at least 60 million pounds. I do not think there's any same club that is going to offer them that much for a 28-year-old, Yohan Wissa. Then Crystal Palace want to retain England duo Ebeleche Eze and McKay amid this interest from Tottenham and Liverpool. That's according to the Mirror. While Tottenham have made a request to Palace over the payment structure of a deal for Ebeleche Eze, as those negotiations continue. That's according to the Independent. Palace are lining up Stade Rennes French defender Jeremy Jacquet as a possible replacement for McKay. That's according to the Independent. Arsenal are also interested in signing Jeremy Jacquet should Alexander Zinchenko leave. Then Aston Villa have added Chelsea and Senegalese forward Nicholas Jackson to their shortlist of attacking options, but could face competition from Bayern Munich. That's according to Florian Plettenberg. Then Leeds United are close to agreeing a deal for AC Milan and Switzerland forward Noah Okafor, 25. And this one, he scored a brace against Liverpool in that 4-2 defeat against Liverpool in pre-season. For those of you that do remember, AC Milan beating up against Liverpool by 4 goals to 2. Then Italian winger Federico Chiesa has told Liverpool he wants to stay. That's according to Fabrizio Romano. Retired at 40 actually to pursue his palm oil farm. Never forget your roots. Okay. Yep. Sometimes people quit, high-end jobs to focus on careers in different arenas, and that's really always interesting. Then Manchester United and England winger Jadon Sancho did reject a move to Roma. That pretty much we discussed. Then Mikel Arteta wants to sign a left winger, but must sell players before he can make any further actions. AR says you are intelligent, knowledgeable, and high society IQ. Thank you so much, AR, for your kind comments. You know everything about football. IQ. I do not know everything about football. I just know a fair share of my piece. But thank you so much for the compliment, really. Then also, we've spoken about Leon Bailey. This one is joining Roma. Crystal Palace did approach Leicester City for a deal to sign a Moroccan midfielder, Belal El Khanous. Let's wait and see. That's according to the Athletic. Then Palace are also considering a season-long loan deal for 29-year-old Wolves and South Korea forward Wang Ki-chan. That's according to the Sun. While Napoli are set to enter the race to sign Rasmus Hojlund following a long-term injury to Lukaku. He did suffer an injury that could keep him out of action for about 3 to 4 months. So they are back in the market for another striker, despite the fact that they signed Luca Lorenzo from Udinese. Then Manchester United are also considering letting Hojlund leave Old Trafford on loan. So that's according to the Guardian. While Brazilian midfielder Douglas Luiz has agreed personal terms with Nottingham Forest, but are waiting for a deal to be finalized with Juventus. I know, right? He's so full of knowledge, my Ugandan Romano. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, the Yellow Dye, for that. Then former Liverpool and Arsenal midfielder Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain is a target for Birmingham City if a deal can be agreed with Besiktas. But I seem to remember reports that had suggested that Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain had part ways on mutual agreement with Besiktas. But anyways, that's the nature of the transfer window. It comes with all speculations and rumors. Then striker Jamie Vardy is keen on reuniting with his former boss, Brandon Rodgers, at Celtic. That's according to the Sun. So let's wait and see. But he also remains a target for Napoli. That's according to the Mail. Anyways, guys, it's been a pleasure doing this for the last 1 hour. Thank you so much for having been part of this wonderful discussion. Thank you so much, AR. Thank you so much, the Yellow Duck, for always sparing the time to be with us and engage us in a fruitful debate. Much greetings to your brothers and friends that you've been tuned onto the broadcast with, and every single one of them that you've mentioned my name in the realms of football fans. I do appreciate you a great deal. Have yourselves a wonderful and blessed day. I will be back later today or in the night to discuss once again more football. We'll be catching updates from that game between Real Madrid and Osasuna. So enjoy the rest of your day and be blessed for the rest of the week. Bye-bye for now.